So today's basically going to be, what is it, part 3, part 4?
This is part 4, and I got the slides ready. If you want to let me share screen, you can jump into it.
Bam. Should be good.
Sweet. No small talk today. Actually, this is good because my wife's like, "You need to finish on time today, otherwise."
Wait, did we have any new people?
Yeah, come on, Josh, do your thing.
No, we didn't. Y'all are all old farts. I'm just kidding. But yeah, we can jump in.
Pretty much, Josh.
All right, sharing screen. Welcome, my party people. All right. So if you guys remember, just to give us a refresher, we're breaking down the weekly calls by two different cohorts, different series that we're doing. First one being more of a beginner type series. We're trying to touch on that flow, but this flow really focusing on analysis being the primary driver here. And so we started with that broad market analysis being the national and regional kind of analysis that we jumped into. Then we jumped into supply and demand, kind of getting more into the weeds in that broad topic. Last week, Josh and Reggie jumped into more of the broker document deep dive, CoStar reports, and kind of went deep into that. And then this week, we're going to talk more about a seller document analysis. So kind of what does the seller provide? How do you analyze the documents that are given? What should you be thinking in that regard? And then next week, we'll have the brokers come on, and that's going to kind of sum up this series of kind of analysis of from broad to very narrow. And then we'll figure out whatever the next flow is going to be, whether it's creating performers or whatever we want to do from there. All right, cool. Seller document review. So big picture for this one, I want everyone to realize that sellers need to provide you documents in order to sell a property. Now, some sellers are very savvy and they will provide you with an abundance of information, and other sellers are what we call mom and pop shops, and they will provide you very little to no information. There have been plenty of multifamily sales that have occurred with literally zero information given. So just understand that when we talk about seller document overview or seller document review, this is a very kind of a broad category. We'll go into more of the traditional things that most people get into, being, starting with the offering memorandum, which isn't necessarily a seller document, but it's part of the selling package traditionally. We'll go into the T12, we'll go to the rent roll, and we'll get into some of the miscellaneous documents as well, such as the, maybe a CapEx review of what some of their past 5 years of capital expenditures have been. We'll talk about lease audits a little bit. And some of more miscellaneous documents at the end, but the bulk of it is going to be on that stuff there. All right, so the first thing, offering memorandum. So who prepares it, first of all? And this is a relatively softball question for an advanced series of course, so I'll throw it out to the crowd here. First one gets it a gold star. Who prepares the offering memorandum?
Broker?
Broker, question mark. That's right. Broker, period. Broker, exclamation point. Yeah, Michael gets it. So the broker is the one who prepares the offering memorandum. And what the point of the offering memorandum is it's supposed to be a one-stop shop for investors like us to be able to understand if this is a deal that's worth our time to really do a deep dive analysis on. Now realize I have this picture here as kind of the glossy brochure for a reason, because that's exactly what the offering memorandum is. It is exactly a glossy brochure. You need to understand that, I threw it down here a little bit, but recognizing the marketing language is the way I put it here is more PC, but people will straight up lie to you on these offering memorandums. It'll be justified lying in their mind, but it is straight up lying. So just be prepared for that when it comes to that. So what are the major components of an offering memorandum? The first and foremost is going to be the big picture property description, right? That's you need to understand what it is you're buying. You'll see as you continue to analyze offering memorandums. I couldn't tell you, there's probably been at least 20 to 50 offering memorandums that I've read that I read the whole thing. I still didn't understand what it was that they were selling. I'm like, what are you even selling here? Like, is this a 20 unit, 150? Like, they didn't even tell the number of units. It was just very terribly done offering memorandums. And if I would have thought about it, I should have compiled a couple of them just to show you how bad they can be. And that's typically done by a less savvy real estate broker who maybe they're more of a residential broker than they're jumping into the commercial space, and they've seen one of these before, so they jump on Canva and they try to create an offering memorandum, but it's not really going to be more of a professional one. If you're dealing with the big guys, in the market, the Marcus and Millichaps, the whatever, the bigger brokerages out there, they're going to have a traditional offering memorandum kind of flow. So it's going to look absolutely fine. But the property description will be the first and foremost, understanding what you're buying. Next thing is they are going to have the financial data within the offering memorandums, typically a summarized version of the financial data. It's the highlights that you really care about to underwrite the deal at a very basic level, but that should be included in the offering memorandum as well. And then market data. So what we've gone through over the past couple of weeks, they should summarize that for you. Like their job is to make it as easy as possible for you to decide the property, to decide to buy the property, I should say, because that's the whole point of this thing. They want to make this as convenient as possible to package all the important data into one spot, so you can effectively take this to your investors, and this could be your slide deck. And you can be, hey, boom, here's all the information we need, and now let's buy the property. Like that's ultimately the goal of an offering memorandum. A really well-written offering memorandum should give you very good confidence that the property is worthwhile or not. Next thing would be property operations. So they'll get into the reasons why how it's currently operating and how you can make it better. Almost every operating memorandum is going to talk about a value add component, because you want to make it seem like you can make a property worth more than what it is. And it's incumbent upon us to really look at an actual offering memorandum to see if that value add component is actually legitimate or not. And so we'll kind of dive into the weeds into offering memorandum. What we're going to do today, Josh, Reggie, and I are actually underwriting a deal currently. How many units is it? I don't remember. It's
224.
224. So 224 units that we're currently underwriting. I'll jump in after we kind of discuss the offering memorandum. We'll jump in there and I'm going to show you the offering memorandum in this one. And we'll go through the whole kind of how our thought process has been so far with this analysis. All right. Also in here, in the financial data that's in the offering memorandum, the reason we want to get the additional data, the T12, the rent roll, and the more raw information is because we're going to compare that against the offering memorandum, because that's when you're going to start to see those discrepancies. What I call lies, what some people are going to call, well, I didn't see it that way, or I didn't consider that to be repairs. That was more CapEx. And you're like, dude, it was a regular term, like it should have been repairs. And so you can break down the data and really kind of uncover the truth by comparing what the offering memorandum is selling versus what the raw data is actually telling you. So that's one of the steps here, is going to be kind of comparing those documents together. And we talked about recognizing the marketing language. Realize this is a sales tool. That is the ultimate utilization of the offering memorandum, is to sell the property. It's not for objective analysis. So your job is to be as objective as possible in your analysis. The point and the intent and the goal of the offering memorandum is to sell the property. So they're at odds, right? There are biases that happening in these, and you need to understand the differences there. And as well as we've already done a deep dive of the market data, and the reason we went so deep these past few weeks is because when you start to look at the offering memorandums, you're going to see like that doesn't seem right, or maybe like let me fact check some of this market data that they're saying, because if something doesn't feel right, if you get that spidey sense that something's wrong, it's probably wrong. So then we've kind of taught you where to go to the other sources. Then you can kind of really fact check these guys to see if they're telling the truth or not. All right, last thing. Limitations. Again, this kind of goes back to the fact that it is a sales pitch. So they're going to intentionally tell you the things about the property that are going to make you want to buy the property. They're not going to talk about the crappy aspects of the property. So just because something is not necessarily lying, they're just omitting facts that might be a detriment of the property, right? So just realize, as you're reading these offering memorandums, in the back of your mind, think, okay, like what do I think might be missing in this description or in this financial data or in their pro forma? Like and this is going to come with experience as you look at more of these, but that is like in the back of your mind as you're reading an offering memorandum. Just kind of have that in the back. Just realize they are intentionally omitting things. I mean, and I do the same thing as a real estate agent selling residential properties. We do the same thing. Like if I go to sell a property, I'm listing a property tomorrow, 2 properties tomorrow, but one of them, they have a water heater from 1997. You better believe in that listing description, I'm not going to start off with old ass water heater, come and get it, right? Like I'm not going to start my description in a listing by advertising the things that are a detriment to the property. I'm going to start saying, oh man, look at this. It's a split lot, huge yard, all these other options. I'm going to like distract the seller and distract the buyers by highlighting the good things and not highlighting the bad things. Goes without saying, but I guess I did say it. So regardless, understand what it is there. Before we jump into the actual OM, Reggie or Josh, anything else big picture you guys want to discuss from the offering memorandum kind of side of the house?
No, I mean, you covered it a good bit. Just, the theme is trust but verify. So
Yeah.
even if you have a really, really awesome looking offering memorandum, just remember it's marketing. It's made to want you to buy that property. So just verify what's in there. Do your own underwriting. Don't take it as gospel.
Yeah.
T12 and the rent roll are usually, and honestly, sometimes you can't even take those as gospel, but they're usually going to be a little bit more accurate or things that you'll want to pay closer attention to than just the offering memorandum.
Yeah. So the offering memorandum,
yeah.
the reason why I'm starting with this is because this is what you're typically going to start with when you're analyzing a deal. Like if you're looking on LoopNet, Crexi, talking to brokers, like this is their thing. They can just email you after you sometimes sign an NDA, non-disclosure, or not. Typically, this is something so public they'll just send it to you without signing an NDA. Sometimes before they send the actual financials, the T12, the rent roll, they'll have you sign an NDA at that point. So just realize that. Okay, so this is an offering memorandum. Like again, typically you're looking at anywhere from 20 to 50 pages in length, depending on how in depth they're going to be. This is for Brookley Point Apartments, and this is one of the ones. Like I said, we're currently underwriting this one to see if we want to pursue this, and if we do want to pursue it, what our offer is going to look like. So 224 units right away. I can see how many units it is, where it is in Mobile, Alabama, and we can kind of jump right into it from there. Always going to have the broker's information up top, so you can contact them as needed. And a classic table of contents, nothing crazy there. Executive summary. All right, here it is. Here's your big picture breakdown. Like I said, what is this? Price. You'll see this quite often. To be determined by the market. So they want you to bring them an offer. So what does that mean to me? Like we're going to bring them a low offer. I will say at that point though, there's almost always what we call a whisper price. So for this one, I think Reggie, you're the one who brought this one to the group, right?
Yeah.
And the broker gave us a kind of a whisper price that he's thinking is the ballpark, right?
Yeah, they'll give you what's called guidance.
Yeah.
And they have a strike price in mind, which is the lowest price that the seller will take, but they usually don't share that with you.
Yeah. So the strike price, like he said, is what the seller has verbalized to the broker. I will take no lower than 10 million on this property, whatever happens to me. Now realize talk is cheap until you see an offer in front of your face as well. And a price isn't the only thing that's going to determine the value of a sale. So when we're talking about price, we'll not get into crafting offers right now. We're going to focus on the analysis. But when we go to crafting offers, realize that's how we can try to be creative. And if the seller's concerned about, a 1031 exchange like we've dealt with in Chase Park and Montgomery, we were willing to extend the due diligence period to really put him at ease, and he was willing to give us a discount on price to make that happen. So it's not always just about price. Just kind of remember that. Year built, number of units, how much square footage is in there. People tout this a lot of times in the multifamily space. This is more really of an industrial or storage thing. We don't really care about how much square footage truly. We care about the size of the specific units, but not as big of a factor there. Average unit size is going to be a factor. This is definitely going to be a factor as far as average in-place units, average in-place price, because this is what you're going to run your numbers on. You can run the quick numbers. Okay, it's 224 units at $730 a door on average right now, and at 95% occupancy. So right away, I can run the number to determine what I would guesstimate an actual NOI is going to be. So when we're running our quick NOI numbers, just to give you a rough idea for these ones, right away I can say, all right, 224 units times 731 a unit. That's what they're getting per month in gross rent, with 95% occupancy. So times 0.95 right now is what they're touting. So this is what they're claiming to be collecting every month. We'll say times 12. So that's their gross income each year. And then what I'll do is I'll strike that in half as an average operating expense ratio of roughly 50%. And so we're looking at roughly $933,000 in NOI is what I would guesstimate out of this property. And so from there, we can get a rough cap rate. We'll say we're going to advertise it at an 8 cap. And so we're looking at roughly $11.6 million asking price is kind of the ballpark that I would expect. For this one, Reggie, what was the guidance we were given up front?
On this one, it was low 60s.
Low 60s per door. So the other way you're going to hear it is average price per door. So 60,000 per door times 224, that's 13 million. Low 60s, they want, probably closer to 63, 64 a door, something like that. So you can see how I run my quick numbers versus, what we're given. Right away, I can see, oh, there's a discrepancy, but that's not the whole picture. We can just kind of see where we stand at least. Okay.
Oh, and by the way, they paid 13.7 for it about a year ago.
Yeah, it's good to know what they paid for because they're probably not going to want to leave it at a loss, but you never know. Okay, continuing with the analysis of the actual OM though. They're going to go into the Mobile market. I'm not going to dive too much into the weeds here. We are obviously, we as a group as 3 Beach, we are heavily invested in the Mobile market. So we don't really care about the glossy brochure of the Mobile market because we're pretty aware of what the market's like. If you're looking to jump into a brand new market and you're reading the OM, I would definitely get into the weeds here with everything else we've done in the past few weeks and really dive with the market analysis on these ones. All right, attractive opportunity. All right, we got this whole concept of value add. If you don't see that in OM, I'm going to be surprised. It's almost in every OM I've ever read. 148 units out of the 224 units remain in classic condition. What do you guys think classic condition means?
Old.
Yeah, it could mean a lot of different things, right? One broker classic condition mean there's a bunch of turds, and another broker could mean, hey man, it's just light rehab. Like it's a very vague term. Like you can see here, their classic condition is if it's truly sitting like this with some Formica countertops, you know, brown cabinets they do have pulls on them. Looks like black appliances versus maybe stainless steel appliances. That's not that bad if they truly are light. And I think that is the case with this one from what Reggie has gathered so far. It's relatively light rehabs with this one. They are estimating a $3,000 per unit rehab. This is a number that I think I've never seen a realistic number from a broker for the cost of a rehab per unit. I would love to be able to keep it to the broker's numbers, but you can almost always at least add 50% or double the number in my history at least. Cool. Rent premium, we'll get into that here in a little bit when we talk about the rent roll and how we can kind of compare. And we're going to talk about the rent premiums and what we think we can gather, especially with talking with the brokers next week, because that's when you really can compare what is the true value add and how much improvements do we have to do to these units to actually get to justify a rent increase. And then they're going to give you a return on investment. This number I almost never even look at because it's all based on just like bogus information. So I care about what they're estimating the rehab to be, what they think the rent can be, and it'll at least give me some guidance as I'm doing my analysis. All right. More Mobile information. It was kind of interesting with this one, how they went like Mobile, and then they went property, then when it went back to Mobile. I thought that was kind of odd, but normally they group it all together of like, hey, here's all the Mobile, the market information, and then they jump into the property information. This is more market information as far as jobs. We talked about all this stuff already as far as age and salaries in the area, market fundamentals, and now they talk about historical and then projected market analysis, which we've already talked in there. All right, from here, this is a good piece of information I like to review. Just again, they're going to highlight. They're not going to show, hey, here's where all the shootings happened. Here's where all the murders happened. Here's the high crime rate area, right? They're going to highlight the best things in the area. And so what we'll typically do from here, I'll go into like Trulia has like a good crime map, or you can jump into like the local police department. You can see where the crimes are, like the heat map of the crimes in the area. And beyond that, it's really just a matter of knowing the area and driving around, getting some boots in the ground, talking to property managers, and seeing how desirable the actual area is. So this one is, where are we? We're somewhere down here, right? Brooklyn by the Bay, Brooklyn Point. Okay, here it is. And so here's the property itself. And it's interesting, they're like advertising Mobile Regional Airport way over here. So they kind of are grasping at straws sometimes, but really this is in a, what we'll call like an emerging area in Mobile, just because we know the local area. So we do have confidence that this area will be solid in the long run. And there's some big picture growth going on over there. Beyond that, some other things you can look as far as key cornerstones. You know, if there's Walmart's or Chick-fil-A's in the area, you can leverage the fact that other companies do a lot of due diligence in market analysis before they jump in. And if there's a Chick-fil-A in an area, you better believe it's probably, if it's not a good area already, it's probably going to be turning into a good area pretty soon, right? So you can kind of leverage the big dogs already, the money they're spending already for market analysis.
I'm wondering how old that little document actually is, because Whole Foods shut down over a year ago.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good catch there.
There you go. Trust but verify, right? There was a Whole Foods here. Great. Thanks, Mr. Broker. Awesome. All right, more employers in the area. All right, let's get through this. Whatever. This is more market analysis. They're going to go through why it's so great. There's a school here. There's employers. All right, sweet. Then we get in the property description. All right, what I like to do, and what I did for this one, right when Reggie sent it to me, I like to compare. I like to compare what the OM's pictures look like to Google. And there's some pretty fun things you can do in Google sometimes. And I'm just gonna see Berkeley. All right. So this is where it is, Berkeley Port Apartments that we're considering to go. So I almost always will go to a street view. What I'll do also right away as I'm doing the analysis quickly, I'll look at their actual reviews on Google. 2.9 in Google, real strong, Clark, right? I mean, that could definitely be improved. And so there is improvements that could be had. I will look at the reviews themselves and I'll see how recent they are. So 6 months ago, there have some complaints here. 8 months ago with some complaints. A year ago, so not overly active. Like we have a chance to hopefully give it a relatively fresh refresh, and depending on the Google presence or online presence, that'll determine whether as part of our marketing plan or our plan of attack, if we're going to actually rebrand this and give it a completely fresh sheet, like we did in Brixton Point or Brixton Apartment. And you can really just get rid of those reviews and start fresh. All right. Cool. So from here, what I like to do is jump in and do like just a classic Google Street View. And it's pretty interesting with some of these, and I'll show you what can happen. So in Google Street View, on the bottom right, you can see the date the image was captured. So this is January of 2022. So relatively recent, within the past year and a half or so. So get an idea of what it feels like. You can get an idea of what the cars look like in the area. Are they beaten down? Are people kind of just moseying on the sidewalks? Are people actually walking around? What is the status of the homes in the area? So I'll do a Google walkthrough in the area just to get an idea of that. But sometimes you can do things like this. So right now, this is January of 2022. If I step forward, oh, look, all of a sudden now I'm in May of 2011. So I can get an idea of how the property has been maintained, how it's changed over the past 10 years and get an idea of what's going on there. And it's pretty interesting. Like if you look from this is 2011 to 2022. Like it's actually looks fairly similar. So I went around the property and I kind of did this. All right, let's see how a snapshot in time, how it compares to then and now. So it's nice to see it's been relatively consistently maintained is what I'm kind of trying to get across there. And so I'll walk around the property in Google Street View to get an idea, and then I'll jump back into the OM. All right, so now we're getting to the property description itself. We'll read the location, which again, we've kind of talked through with the Google Street View. As far as the years being built, depending on where you are, maybe all of your multifamily are super old. In Mobile, we have a chance to really capture properties after 1978 to avoid things like, lead-based paint, which is, always a factor, or asbestos is a factor as the older the properties get. So if you can avoid the older properties, I mean, that's always ideal, but it's not going to be a showstopper for us. Just one more thing to highlight as you're looking at these. Cool. Zoning doesn't matter. Good to see the size and the density, but you assume a lot of these are maxed out, but there are some properties you'll see that there might be a value out of the fact that you can build more. All right. From there, they talk about what is tenant paid versus what is owner paid, and how the all reimbursements are going to go as far as electricity, water, trash, gas. And so this is going to be something we're going to jump into the T12. It's good to know there. And then they break down the actual parcel ID, so we can jump into the property appraiser's website to see what has sold when. And Reggie is the expert at leveraging things like this when we go to do tax. What's the word? Tax arguments, tax
protest.
Tax protest. When you try to reduce your actual value on the property to reduce your tax liability. All right. More information as far as, quality of the type of materials that are used for the building. And then from here, amenities. So amenities are one thing to understand, especially as you're looking at comps. Garbage disposals are one common thing that people will add as amenity, but they also add at big repair costs. So it's pretty common for us to just get rid of those. But depending on the class of the apartment, sometimes they're required. And you can just go down through the amenities to see, all right, what is this one offering versus some of the comparables that we'll jump into. You'd see the layout of the property, see if there's any way you can maybe add value through the layouts. Typically not, they're typically pretty maxed out. And then they jump into the numbers. So the numbers, again, not going to go too into the weeds of these specific numbers, but we'll compare this. You'll see here, it's pretty interesting. They show a T6 income and a T3 income and a T1 income analysis, and then the buyer's underwriting. So we'll go more into that in a second when we talk about the T12 and why they have a T6, T3, and T1. It's pretty interesting to the way they did this one. And then we'll go into the income expenses. So they talk about with their pro forma. So this is their cash flow. They're saying, here's my assumptions when I'm creating this pro forma. And so what this is the broker's analysis. This is the trust but verify technique. This is the broker saying, if I had my crystal ball in at year 3, you should have a net operating income of 1.3 million. And they don't have the value on this one. Maybe it's the next page. We'll see. But this is where they start to really kind of try to blow smoke up your ass, really is what it is as they get the projections. But one of the ways you can really start to underwrite or we'll say critique their analysis is if they actually offer you their underwriting assumptions. They typically will. Sometimes they don't. You need to kind of pull out their assumptions by parsing out the information. But from here, you can kind of pull it out. So like, their loss to lease right now, they're estimating 7.5. And we're going to show you what the actual numbers are in the current T12. Their vacancy, they're saying 5% per market standard. Like there's a market standard, but then there's how is this property actually performing, which we'll show you. They're looking at non-revenue units. Okay, so that's you giving up a unit for conceding a unit for whatever reason. Collection loss. Oh, only 2% in collection loss. That's great. Concessions. They're saying okay, no concessions. All right, that's awesome. RUBS income. If you guys remember what that is, RUBS is when you're getting the utilities buyback from the tenants. Other income. So you can basically pull out the information here. Let's see. Upgrade premiums. Let's see. Expenses. The one things I wanted to pull out here, I thought they talked about insurance. So insurance right now. So insurance along the Gulf Coast is a big factor. So they're estimating insurance at $975 per door, where we're looking at closer to realistically probably $1,200 a door, which is a significant difference in insurance cost. As far as repairs and maintenance, we'll pull this like, sure, you can have a bunch of rules of thumb for what is the estimated repairs and maintenance, but I like to see the actual history. We'll go into the T12 in a second, and we'll compare what is their actual historical versus what they're selling in the glossy brochure at only $550 per unit per year. Payroll. Payroll is another one. I don't like to break down per unit. I think it's a kind of a silly argument to break down payroll per unit, to be honest with you. I like to just look at how many people do we need to run this? And what is realistic salaries to make that happen? Or in the case that we're trying to underwrite this, is we have a property manager that's going to effectively run the payroll through his flat fee rate. And so there's different ways to kind of crack that nut. And so you kind of just break down one line by line to figure out what is realistic. And they are having management fees in here. Sometimes you'll see pro formas will not have management fees because for properties currently run and self-managed, oftentimes you'll see the pro forma magically not have a 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% property management fee in there, which is a significant contributor to your NOI. Capital reserves. This is going to be another one to consider because based on the current status of the property, which we'll talk about here in a second, as far as CapEx and miscellaneous documents at the end, you need to understand what do our CapEx reserves have to be to really be comfortable moving forward with this one. And obviously debt assumptions. Debt assumptions, this is going to be the biggest delineator for how much you cash flow. Sure, can we buy any property in cash flow? Most likely if we buy it with cash, but us as investors are almost always going to leverage a bank or some sort of lender to buy the property. So debt is going to be the biggest factor there. So understanding what the debt assumptions are. Cool. I'm not going to go into the weeds for this one, but again, this is his brochure, his pie in the sky numbers for what he thinks this thing could be worth at the end of the day. Let me see, maybe it's the next one here. That's it. No. So he'll go in here, unit mix summary breakdown. So you can see the number of 1 bedrooms with the number of 2 bedrooms, how many units are each. So right now it's equal 50-50 breakdown, and you can kind of it's a good gee whiz knowledge as we kind of start to do the analysis. All right, then he'll jump into the comparables. It is funny sometimes when you jump into the comparable piece, they'll pull comparables from downtown Mobile and they'll pull a comparable way outside Mobile. It's a different renter profile that's going to be renting downtown versus, in some other area. And so it's a good idea to understand what comparables are actually comparables. We do the same thing in the residential market. Like I could make any house look to be worth way more or way less, depending if I'm working with a buyer or seller, however I want to kind of frame that house. And they're going to do the same thing here with their comparables. And so when you're dealing with a broker, ideally, like next week, if you can sometimes find other comparables that might justify a lower value in your mind and maybe give you a more realistic understanding of what rents can be actually be achieved. Let's see here. Year built is going to be big factors. Oftentimes you'll see something being, 30, 40, 50, 60 years newer, and they're using it as comparable and way outside. So this one, Knollwood, where's Knollwood? 1978, 704 units. So you really kind of just start to compare. And so what I'm going to do from there, you figure out the breakdowns, you look at the look. Well, this is the actual subject property that we're looking at. And you can see, hey, are these actually comparable or not? And then if they are, like for instance, in this one, I'm probably going to say the closest one, proximity is going to be the best. So Old Shell Commons, let's see, Old Shell Commons here is in 1964, so it's an older property, which is great. 94 units, so it's smaller. Average square footage is slightly smaller as well. So me being a pessimistic buyer, I'm like, okay, that's probably one that I want to pull as an idea of like, how are they actually doing right now? So let's pull that one up. Old Shell Commons. Let's see which one is. Pathways. So upgrades, currently doing renovations, new flooring, new appliances, new countertops. 1 bedrooms are $750, which is what ours are right now that we're under, that they're advertising. 2 bedrooms are $875, and which is slightly below the rent that we're looking at for ours, for the 2 bedrooms, all of which have washer and dryer connections. So you can jump in and kind of compare here, effective rent versus market rent. No, interesting. Didn't you say 750? 1 bedrooms are 750. Oh, without washer dryers. I see. Okay, so these ones have washer dryers, I'm assuming is what they're advertising here. And so they're calling an effective market rent of 856 overall. Okay, cool. So we get an idea of what these comparisons are doing. You can see this is definitely an older style building versus ours has a slightly more modern, we'll say, look to it, even though it's definitely not modern. All right. So anyways, you jump into the white weeds, you get into the comparables, and that's the big gist of how I'm going to kind of review an offering memorandum. Before we open up to questions for OM specifically, Reggie, what else you want to add when you're kind of reviewing OMs?
Well, I've mentioned this a few times, but I'm trying to emphasize it here. The rent comps, that's what your competition's doing. And so you can use it to gauge like how well you do against the competition. That's kind of one way to think about it. And then when we're looking at affordability, that's when you look at medium household income, cost of living, things like that. So you'll kind of use those things. You both of those as a guide, and they can tell you different things depending on which one's greater than the other, or if they're close to being equal. And then I guess the only other thing I'll mention, you notice they break this down by rent per square foot. The reason they do that is so you can kind of compare on a square foot basis instead of, because like I'm just looking at our subject property, 750 square feet. Okay. And, we have we're averaging 86 cents a square foot for the property. But then if you go down to Village Commons, Old Shell Commons, where is it at? Oh, yeah, there it is. Look, so now they've got a really high rent per square foot. But if you look at the 1 beds, they're really small. And, they have one that's basically the same size in a 2 bedroom as our 1 bedroom. And so, that's why they put it on that dollar per square foot basis. So just remember that when you're trying to convert. So if you had an 800 square foot apartment, then you would multiply it by that number, or the average of the market, should I say. Yeah.
This is definitely an art in the analysis. I will say, for me, I don't like to use the rent per square foot as like, they'll typically use it as more of an advertising tool to bolster what their thoughts are. Most renters aren't going to say, well, my rental budget is $1 per square foot. Like they normally say, okay, I have $800 to spend and I need 2 bedrooms. You know what I mean? Like they're going to look at bedrooms and price. However, it is just one more way to kind of analyze the market and see if see what trends out that you can pull out of that. Now, when we're dealing with like single family homes in the residential market, price per square foot is a big player in that market. But in the rental market, personally, not one that I like to lean on a ton, but other people will definitely leverage that in their analysis. This is more of an art and not a science when we're kind of looking at these deals. Cool. So when we're talking about these, like offering memorandum and stuff, one thing I will say is I will spend probably, like we just spent what, half an hour? Just kind of briefly talking through it. I will typically spend a good hour or so kind of analyzing the offering memorandum. If we're going to jump into the weeds, like we're dedicating a good hour or 2 between the offering memorandum, the T12 and the rent roll and whatever additional documents we have. and kind of putting it all together, like 1 to 2 hours at a minimum to really kind of, that's just the baseline analysis of a deal. And that's just analyzing the documents before we actually start to create our own pro forma. So from a time perspective, just kind of put that in your, cage that in your brain of where you stand. Any questions on offering memorandums before we move on, guys? No, sweet.
I got a quick question.
Yeah, fire away.
At what point? Yeah, so going to like the whisper price, slightly related to the OM. Like, at what point is it just insulting to like submit an offer at versus like just simply trying to get the best price? Like, if this is 11 mil, for example, like is 7 just offensive and not worth my time? Or like, at what point, if that makes any sense, like any rules of thumb along those lines?
What I'll say is, as long as you can justify your price, I think I have no problem offering that price. And so realize this is a relationship game, and you're typically playing telephone when we're dealing with these. So this is if you have an offering memorandum, that means you're not talking to the seller, because a seller would not create his own offering memorandum. So this means I'm going through a broker to make an offer. And so if I have the means to justify a $7 million offer, say, dude, you totally missed the fact that, you know, right across the street is the freaking city dump, right? And the reason they're at this % occupancy is because of X, Y, and Z. And the best I can put in my pro forma is this, this, and this. And here's my justification, man, for a $7 million offer. I wish I could offer you more. I really wish I could, but this is the best I could do. Let me know if your seller's interested at 7 million. You know, I mean, so if you can justify it, that's one way to do it. And versus I don't want to say you're never, but you're almost never going to get a deal accepted, a low offer accepted, if you just throw it out there. Here's my LOI. Let me know if they accept. Like, that's never going to fly. And I'll let Reggie or Josh shine any additional light on that one too, because they're typically the ones dealing with the broker. I'm more the behind the scenes guy.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember the whole 10-minute analysis that we covered. I think back when we were it may be writing on first part 4 or something, but it's basically the same thing that Matt was just doing a second ago when we were initially looking at the numbers, and he was like, all right, what are they making? What's the vacancy rate divided by the cap rate? That's like the quick 10-minute. All right, what is the ballpark price point of this actual deal? And then if you really wanted to jump into the weeds, if you felt like, okay, I'm not too far off, I think this could still make sense based on some other data that you had, and you wanted to dive deeper, and then you finally get your justifiable number and you want to send it to the broker, you could do it that way, or you could just stick with the 10-minute analysis and say, hey, here's this, and this reason is why I'm coming up with this particular price point. And here's and I think in that lesson, we also went over an actual example like email that you can send to the broker. So if you guys have any questions about justification and what that email looks like, you guys could check that out.
No. I'm never
Yeah,
afraid
and
to
guys,
go, Reggie.
I usually send my underwriting to the broker. I'm like, here, you know, poke holes. This is how I got to what I got. If I'm missing something, if I'm making a mistake, hey, help me understand where it is, and I'll be glad to get closer to the number.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the humble approach, right? Like, hey man, I wish I could do more. Like, hey, this is where I'm getting. Please let me know if where you know. And I'll call them out, but I'll call them out humbly, right? Like, hey man, I know you had 530 for repairs per unit, but dude, look at the history. It looks like it's really been averaging like $2,000 a unit, like on average for repairs. And I'm struggling justifying, because looking forward to the CapEx, like we're going to need new siding coming up soon too, and again, we're going to need this. And if you really kind of just come from a humble approach, I think people are much more apt to hear. And this goes back to relationships as well. The better relationship you have, the more open communication you have with the brokers, and it's really much more back and forth and a friendly conversation. And so that's an entirely different discussion, but relationships are key. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah. Do you send, Reggie, when you send the underwriting, do you send like your full underwriting, like including like your IRR, like things like that? Or is it like an abbreviated, hey, here's like the P&L, like here's what I'm sort of assuming?
It depends. It just depends on the situation, I guess. If there's just some high level things that, you know, make it a no deal for us, then I usually just put bullet points. But I think, Mash, you might remember Jaguar Cottages that we underwrote. I shared the entire budget, including a 5-year projection. Now, it's not our analyzer. I didn't have investor returns and anything like that, but I was showing cash on cash and IRR. And I was like, look, this is what I'm getting. And I was able to justify all of it. And he was like, I understand. And So it's situational, but it can be bullet points or it can be your entire budget.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we share with the brokers is, here is our business plan that we like to model. Here's our perpetuity model, and here's the numbers we have to get for us to really justify the purchase. And so they understand up front, like our model, and that, especially for the brokers that we deal with on a regular basis. New brokers, if they're sending us deals, they don't know that, right? And so, hey, here's a killer deal. You're like, okay, great. That's more of a traditional syndication model. It doesn't have enough meat on the bones for what we're trying to do, but thank you anyways. All right, cool. So that's offering memorandum. Jumping into the next document, T12, the trailing 12 months. This is just the fancy word, what you'll find in the commercial space, commercial multifamily spaces. We like to make up words just to make it seem like we have this cool club. All of this is a profit and loss statement, guys. And so everyone else in the world just calls it a P&L. We call it a T12. And the T12 specifically is the last 12 months of profit and loss. The importance of this thing is the fact that this should be accurate information that you can justify. And part of our offers and part of the documentation in our offers and LOI is saying this offer is contingent upon the fact that the data that you've given us so far is accurate. Because the moment we go and start our underwriting and we find out the fact that they maybe hid an expense from us or did something inappropriately, then that gives us the ability to either get our money back and leave, or really retrade appropriately, because the part of the offer is contingent upon the seller not lying to us. And so this should be truth data, but to Reggie's point, across the entire business here, always trust, but always verify on. Don't even trust. How about that? Okay, cool. So we'll do a quick line by line analysis. And again, this is going to be, I know this is a detailed lesson, but we're trying to get through these 3 documents. So I'll try to hit the highlights of the ones that I look at, because if we truly go line by line of a full T12, there's a lot of lines. And so it's going to be too much to go over. So I'll kind of go through my highlights, and I'll let Reggie and Josh kind of fill in the blanks for things that I'm missing. Trends are one thing we're going to look out for, though. So as you're looking at these, one of the great things that between Reggie, Josh, and I, we all look at the data differently. So I like how Josh, Reggie, and I are, as a partnership, are so different, because we all pull out some other concerns that the other people wouldn't have caught. And so when you're looking at trends, that's really is kind of like a personality thing, kind of the way you analyze deals. And so I'll show you some trends hopefully here in the data we're going to be looking at. On top of trends, the other thing you're going to look out for is irregularities. And I'll show you some of the irregularities that I caught with this T12 that Reggie didn't quite caught, but then Reggie catches other T12s that Josh didn't catch. And so we're all kind of backing each other up when we're kind of catching these things. And some irregularities totally make sense. You send it to the broker like, man, why did they have triple the salary for this month for their payroll? Like, oh, okay, cool. They had to fire someone. They had to hire double the staff. It didn't work out, whatever. And then there's a story behind it. And other times the broker's like, oh, you know what? I don't know. Let's see what happened here. Oh, there was a sinkhole and they had to fill it in. Like, oh, crap, that's a big deal. Let me figure out what's going on. So we're on top of trends. We're trying to find the outliers, if you will. And then from there, we're going to use this T12. Like I said, in the OM, they had the T1, the T3, and the T6. That's just T1 is just the last month's profit and loss. T3 is the last 3 months profit and loss, and T6 is the last 6 months profit and loss. We'll use those based on to create the pro forma. Again, I'm not trying to get too in the weeds of creating pro formas and creating offers today. But in general, one of the rules of thumb in the business is you're going to take the last 12 months of expenses and the last 3 months of income. That's kind of a common thing people will look at. So you average the last 12 months of expenses, average the last 3 months of income, and that's what you'll use to kind of create a pro forma. That's not necessarily what we do, but that is a very common thing you'll hear within the industry when you're trying to create a pro forma. All right, so let's look at a T12. All right. This is Brookley Point T12. Now, what you'll see right away, oh, did you combine these? Is Brookley Point the one that was 6 and 6? I thought it was 6 and 6.
No, or was it?
What was the one that was 6 and 6? I thought it was Brookley Point. Sorry, guys, give me a second. I wanted to show you something that was interesting.
What are you talking about? 6 and 6?
We had 6 months. It was like 6 months from one property manager, then 6 months from the other property manager. Wasn't that Brookley Point?
Oh, I don't know.
I thought it was.
It's a great point, though. Just making sure when you actually look at the T12, is it legitimately a T12? You'd be surprised how many brokers don't actually know what a T12 is. They just know that everyone calls it that. So they'll send it to you, but in all actuality, it'll be like 4 months. And then they'll have not even attempted to annualize it. And they'll be like, look at how great the deal is. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
because you have all the expenses in there.
So this is the first one that was given. I'll just go off this one that we were given up front. So I don't know, did you get this updated, Reggie, or did you just compile them?
I think that was this is an updated one that I got just like today or yesterday.
Okay, cool. So this is good to highlight. So this is the first T12 that we were given, Brookley Point T12. The first thing to note is they gave you the T12, the trailing 12 months, and they gave it to us in May. But look at the first month that they gave us. The most recent month was December. So how useful is that information? It's useful, but not super useful, right? Like in the past 5 months, a lot could have changed. But I'm still going to analyze it as if this is the T12. And the other thing to note is you'll see zero income, zero through May, but all of a sudden in June, they're showing a bunch of income because what happened is they had a different property manager with a different type of T12 for the first 6 months. And so you're like, all right, I need to take this data from different sources, trying to compile it and get an idea of what trends are between these ones. So it's an interesting to see because every property manager will run their T12s differently. Cool. So what I like to do right away, when I get a T12, right away, I'll use a little bit of Excel magic and I'm going to start to average things out because I want to see what these averages look like. So right now I'm creating a T6. So I just say equals the average of these 6 months and I highlight and I drag that all the way down. So now this last column is one that I've created to look at an average of the months. This helps me identify a couple of things. Trends is one, and then outliers is the other. So if I see an average of, let's say here, try to give you an example. Why is it? Oh, average times 12. Sorry, I didn't look at, I deleted my average column. So what this is average times 12, meaning the T6 times 12. I'm comparing the actual annual, what they're showing here to what the average would be. So, but the other thing you could do is just say equals average of these ones to identify trends. And then from there, you can just drag that down. And then you can figure out, okay, the average income is 156. This is, market rent. But down here, you could be like, okay, the average vacancy loss is $12,000 a month. But this month they had $14,000. Not necessarily an outlier. That's within, a couple sigmas. That's fine. But this is what I'll use to compare to find outliers and trends. All right. So that's one thing I'll do. Next thing I like to do is I like to throw in some ratios right away that typically aren't in there. So I like to figure out what is the ratio of market rent to actual net rent revenue. And so I'll just do the division. I'll say, okay, take this divided by this. And what is our ratio of effectively physical and economic vacancy, right? Because they're not going to advertise that. If you remember in their OM, we'll go back here. Let me get rid of that. Boom, boom, boom. Where's the lovely broker assumptions? In their OM, they're going to say a vacancy of 5% per market standard. But then you look at his vacancy here, this one, you're looking at 13% vacancy, or no, it's 23% vacancy, 18% vacancy with an average over the past 6 months of an 18% vacancy. That's physical and economic vacancy. It's a big deal, right? That's way different than 5% when you run your numbers. So this is just, again, highlight the fact that sure, market might be 5%, but this property is running a little bit differently.
Matt, can you blow that up a little bit, Matt?
I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I forgot that we're like zooming. Yep, absolutely. Good call. Let me see. Yeah, so net rent revenue. So right under the rent revenue, I just create my own column to do this, and then I'll average it out. So that's how I said, okay, that's the vacancy factor to effect. Okay.
Now, guys, I just want to point out real quick. So what Matt just calculated is an economic vacancy. Yeah. And where the OEM can be misleading is they'll talk about physical vacancy. They'll talk about how many units are actually occupied divided by how many units exist. That's physical. What he just did was economic, and there will usually be some disparity between the two. Economic is usually lower. And so they might give you a physical vacancy, 5%, but this kind of gives you a little bit more insight into how the property is actually performing.
Yeah.
Is that actually swallowing loss to lease as well? Is that part of that? Because you're going off market rents less what they're being paid, right?
Say that one more time.
Talking about, does the economic include loss to lease?
Right, because you're
does.
going off what the should be market rent would be, right? So loss to lease, is that not encompassed in that?
It is.
Loss to lease is encompassed, yeah. So they have what they call market rent here. Then they have gain or loss to market rent. This is their loss to lease. They also have vacancy, what they call vacancy, which is physical vacancy. That's included as an aspect of economic vacancy. They have concessions, which is a form of economic vacancy, is concessions. Another vacancy is going to be, you know, write-offs, which we'll talk about another highlight here in a second. Bad debt recovery, which is good. That means you're making up for bad debt. Then prepaid rent. So like this is a good picture of understanding where the money's coming in. So Reggie brings up a good point. You know, when you're talking about vacancy, I care about economic vacancy, right? I don't want 100% occupancy, physical occupancy, but half the people aren't paying the rent. That's not good, right? Like I don't necessarily care as much about physical occupancy. I care about how much money am I making per door. So anyways, that's what we'll say here. That's a good thing to bring up there, Reggie. Now I'll start to see things like, what are some things that are catching my eye? I see write-offs here, and I also see write-offs here. So they have multiple areas where there's write-offs, and these write-offs aren't insignificant. You know, so as I'm going through this, I just kind of highlight, because then I'll do a little recording, or Josh, Reggie, and I will jump on a call and we'll just kind of analyze it together based on my thoughts and Josh's thoughts and Reggie's thoughts, and we'll kind of combine them all together. And so this was one of the questions we go back to the broker, like, dude, like for instance, in what month is this? In June, they had damn near $16,000, $14,000 or $15,000 in write-offs. You know, what was that for? So we kind of dive into the weeds of what's going on there. All right, faster, funnier to kind of get through this a little bit faster here. This is total revenue. So this was like economic vacancy, but then now we're looking at additional income opportunities and write-offs and these other things. So this was their total revenue versus the market revenue, gross potential revenue, and they're looking at 17%. So that was kind of collective, we'll call it economic vacancy, which is about the same. So nothing too big to highlight there. All right. Now, other things as I'm pulling through here. So next thing you're gonna see operating expenses, salaries. Salaries is a big one. So what I did here, I said, okay, right now they're showing an administrative salary and a maintenance salary, total combined of $87,000 and $69,000. So total salary of $156,000 a year. So to me, I'm like, okay, is that enough for a 224 unit? I'll pull the crowd. How many employees do you think you need to run a 224 unit apartment complex? What do you guys think?
At least 4 or 5.
4 or 5. What would those positions be, Paul? What do you think?
Well, if you got 221 units, I'm going to have at least 2 maintenance guys, 2 office folks, and a manager.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, I would say 4 at a minimum, right? So 4 people, effectively 2 in the office and two running maintenance. Like that should be a doable operation. And do we think $156,000 a year is a doable for 4 salaries? 156,000 divided by 4, $39,000 a pop.
No.
Probably not, right? That's probably not enough salary to run an efficient operation. So one more thing to highlight. All right, dude, this is something we need to make sure we address and figure out what's going on. The other thing to highlight here is it may be short staffed right now. So that means there may be things that are not highlighted that are factors we need to make sure we're going on in when we're doing our inspections. All right, other things to highlight here. What was this one? Temporary service. I don't know why I highlighted that, but I did. Let's see other things. Total salary. So here's our total. This is what they had as total salaries. I think temporary service was like part-time employees. And so in the end, I said, okay, I thought it was 156, but really it's 264 for total salaries. 264 divided by what I think $66,000 a person. That's probably reasonable, right? For get 2 maintenance people for probably $50,000-$60,000 a year, leasing person for maybe 40 to 50, and then a manager for a little bit more, right? Like probably about right. I will say this is becoming more and more expensive. So be conservative when you're estimating salaries, guys. Okay, so that's how I'm underwriting that. I'm literally going through line by line when I'm doing this. So, but I'm trying to hit the highlights for you guys. Utilities is going to be another one, because part of this game plan is the fact that the tenants are paying everything. So I look at what are their actually charges for utilities, and then I'm going to go back and make sure that the tenants are actually paying that amount or a good portion of it. Realize when you're doing rubs and having the tenants pay back utilities, you try to avoid them paying back more than your utility charges, because then technically you're acting as a utility company yourself. And then you have additional regulations and restrictions to adhere to because you're acting as a water company or electric company and so on. So you don't want to make more than your bills at that point. All right, let's continue on, see what else I've highlighted here. They go into general repairs and maintenance. And so right here, I take a summary of, all right, how much is the total repairs and maintenance on average per year? And there we go. So I took it per unit, 584 per unit. That's how I can compare against his OM. If you remember, it was 550 per unit. Okay, cool. Like he was in the right ballpark, but again, slightly conservative for that. All right, keep going down, kind of compare these make readies. All right, cool. How much are they make readies? This make ready in my mind is really part of repairs and maintenance. You know, it's not really, this is not a capital expenditure for a make ready. This should be part of your OM. So this is them potentially padding the numbers a little bit more. So I look at this, I say, really, my overall, I should be averaging probably around $700 a door on average for repairs and maintenance, because I consider that to be part of that. So a little bit more pad to what he's looking at. So as I'm going down, I'm looking at landscaping, you can do your basic check. Okay, does it make sense for roughly $2,000 a month-ish for landscaping? Yeah, that's probably about right for a big unit like that. But you know, Reggie, I love Reggie because he's a local. He's like, he probably got a cousin or a friend or some old girlfriend that cuts lawns in the area and can do it for half the price. And so it's good to know local people who can maybe cut these things down.
Oh, hey, by the way, William bought the tractor today.
Or a brother in town who likes to buy a tractor and we can use it in our RV park. It's great. Sweet. So as we're going down, I'm just going line by line, seeing what I can, looking at trends. So when I say trends, I'll kind of finger drag across to see if there's anything crazy. I kind of look this way for trends, and then you also will highlight the outliers of that as well. Other things, management fee. What I'll do here, I say, okay, the management fee, they were charging $49,000. What does that equate to? I did the math, and that equates to 3%. So 3% management fee, that's relatively standard for the industry. So that was good to see. Other things, if I go the right direction here, let's see, this was total insurance. Insurance is a huge aspect of the industry along the Gulf Coast. So I'll say, okay, total insurance paid is $227,000 divided by 224 units. That's $1,000 a unit. In the pro forma, they were saying what, $925 a unit is what he was estimating, and which is already lying to us. Yeah, $975. So it's already lying to us there, and we know it's going to be higher anyways, unless we're able to get to use the whole master policy thing, which I'm not going to hold my breath for. So again, one more thing to highlight there. All right, let's see what else we're going as I'm finger dragging down.
They shared this Excel spreadsheet with you, or is this the one you built for this?
No, this is what they give you. They give you the raw data, then I'll pull out the averages and stuff. But yeah,
Okay.
they give you all the raw data. They don't make it easy for you to find the outliers. You got to kind of do some digging.
And I feel like you could probably do a whole video on your Excel spreadsheet with mastery.
Between me and Reggie, I'm sure we could have a whole course on it. My goodness. Cool. From there, you get the NOI. Here's the NOI of 473,000. So this is the NOI that they were estimating, or they're showing their average NOI. I pulled out this NOI based on their past 6 months of operating expenses and income. How does that compare to what we were looking at earlier? What did we say? I don't even know. I'm curious.
I don't think we had it on there.
933 was our NOI estimation.
933. Oh, because this was for 6 months. So this would be this times 2 is what it would be. There it goes. This 946. No, this should be times 12. Never mind. That
Yeah,
should be,
you already have it in times 12.
Yeah, it should be times 12. Never mind. So obviously NOI is different from what we're looking at there. So okay, cool. NOI, we got that. We pull that number out, and then they have capital expenditures. So capital items. This is where you can start to be like, are these actual capital expenditures, or are these actual repairs? And so this is where they can start to highlight and make their NOI look stronger by saying, oh, these are just CapEx items, guys. And you're like, well, not really. So you can figure out what the actual adjust your repairs and maintenance is needed there. So you can see, all right, what are they averaging an average CapEx per unit per year? This divided by 224, looking at 2,700 per unit per year in CapEx. To give you an idea there, versus the OM, I think was touting
Like $300 or
I think it was 300. Yeah. Capital reserves, 300 per unit per year. Like, whoa, that's a big difference, man. And so you can figure out what's going on there. And that may be realistic after you renovate the unit, but you got to figure out, what have they actually been doing and versus what they're advertising. There's some big differences there, right? Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Debt service. Debt service, you take with a grain of salt. It doesn't really matter because you're going to have different debt service unless you are assuming the loan. Then you can look at their debt service and see what's going on there. Cool. I think, let me see if there's any, I thought there was one more thing. I guess that's it. Cool. And so that's how I kind of go through the T12. And then I could do the same thing for the previous 6 months and kind of pull out, and I can compare the previous 6 months to the current 6 months, and we can kind of pull the data there. But that's kind of my baseline analysis of a T12. I'm going to kind of finger drag down, look for the trends, look for the highlights, look for the outliers, and then I'm going to compare this to the offering memorandum. And that's going to this is going to help me build a picture when we go to, not next week, because next week we're still talking about analysis with brokers, but probably next course we'll get into actual pro forma development. And that is where I'm going to kind of build that picture and start to build out what I think the future is going to look like. Josh, Reggie, any other additions for T12 you want to highlight here?
Yeah, I did want to mention, so if you scroll all the way up and you look at the very top of this spreadsheet, see what on row 4, this tells you that this is an accrual based T12. So if any of you guys are familiar with accounting, there's 2 systems to record income and expenses. One's accrual, one's cash based. That's important to know, and both are handy to have, both are valuable. But accrual, just quickly, cash basis, that'll tell you exactly when cash exchanged hands. So, if somebody pays the rent that month, it's recorded. If you pay a bill that month, it'll show up. Accrual, it'll show things like vacancy losses. It'll show the delinquency write-offs. It'll show loss to lease that doesn't show up on the cash base. But really, the big difference with accruals, accrual basis, is that this is when the income is supposed to have been earned. So it's not what it actually changed hands. It's what was supposed to have been earned in that time period. And then on the expense side, same thing applies to the expense. It's not when it was actually paid. It was when perhaps you received an invoice. So there's some nuance there. So make sure you know which one you have. And then you can actually compare the two, and that'll tell you some things as well. But just make sure to remember that cash basis is what actually happened. Accrual basis is what was supposed to happen. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but it's just good to know.
Yeah, they're not often going to tell you either. This is a unique scenario where they literally tell you exactly how this was accounted for. If you've got some crummy mom and pop type individual, or just a property manager that doesn't keep in very good books, it may not even tell you whether or not it's accrual or cash based. So you ask the broker, they won't know. They ask the seller, they won't know. Hopefully they'll know, but if not, then you have to use your best judgment.
Yep, I'm just trying to pull one thing really quickly, see if this is going to work before I show you guys. 1 second.
Well, you're not going to chat GPT, are you?
I'm gonna see if this one works for this. I know it does for other ones, but I'm just going to show them quickly as kind of a quick hack. If I can get this damn thing to move.
What are you doing?
Shh.
Just watch this, Josh. Watch.
All right. This is new to me, fellas. We're all learning together.
Matt has been in the bat cave.
I'll just show you guys what I'm doing. And if it fails, we're going to fail real time. Okay. All right. So what you can do in ChatGPT, if you haven't used it, if you don't know what ChatGPT is, man, just keep living under your rock. Okay, guys. And we can tell you more about it later, but it's artificial intelligence chatbot. Basically, it's large language model. It does some crazy stuff. One of the things that it can do, it can help you analyze a pro forma. It can analyze a T12 for you. So you can say, analyze this pro forma of a multi-family apartment complex that I'm considering purchasing. Tell me the trends and outliers that I should be aware of. Is this good deal to buy? I'm gonna see it. Here is the pro forma. I think this is gonna be too much data, I think, because this is a pretty large T12. Oh, no, it worked. Okay, cool. So it's crazy. So it'll tell you, analyze pro forma. Here we go. Income. The total rent is consistent due to concessions with write-offs. The gain to loss of market rent shows negative values, indicating the actual rent collected may be lower than the market rent. This could be due to factors such as concessions or vacancies. Other revenue resources such as pet rent, application fees, and rent rates, and insurance contribute to the overall income, but have varying amounts each month. So it does a pretty good job of kind of summarizing the data. I'll be honest. Now, this is not something I would rely on heavily by any stretch of the imagination. It's almost more of a parlor trick at this point, I'll be honest. But there is some application here that we are definitely pursuing in the multifamily space because, like I said, well, I'll spend an hour or two on OM. I would love to be able to give this an offering memorandum and a T12 and a rent roll. I think we're getting to the point where we can almost do that and say, analyze this deal collectively, right? Like that would be really, really cool. Salaries and payroll show a significant portion of the operating expenses, with administrative and maintenance salaries being the largest component. So it highlights the good things. Anyways, that's it. More of a parlor trick. Just want to show you guys, this is one outlet that you could kind of leverage. If anyone figures out how to truly utilize this to its full extent, let me know. We can make a lot of money together, I'm sure. Okay, and that's the
Hey, Matt.
What's
Hey,
up?
Matt, this is Oliver. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, did you just copy paste basically from Excel? That's it. Just copy paste and that works.
Yeah, literally copy and paste. That was it. I tell
Okay,
you,
great.
yeah, you can tell it whatever you want to tell it to do, but yeah, it was a copy paste that Excel spreadsheet.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man. All right, that is the T12, guys. Any questions across the board for T12 stuff? Cool. All right, rent roll. If you love spreadsheets, you're going to love rent rolls even more than T12s because especially for a 224 unit, it's just lines of just throw up basically. All right, so what is a rent roll? Realize what it is. It's a snapshot in time of the units. The key components here are going to be tenant names, so you actually see like who the warm body is in which unit, the unit types, the breakdown, the mix, lease terms, so you can start to see an idea of what the leases are look like, as well as security deposits. So it gives a good snapshot of like the people and where they stand in each unit. You can use this for vacancy and turnover analysis for sure to get an idea of what is the snapshot of vacancy. We're going to look at trends for vacancy, but this is definitely the snapshot, the most recent, which you want to know. You need to know when you take over the property, which units are actually vacant. We're also going to heavily rely on the rent roll as well as the leases when we go to our due diligence phase to verify, again, use that word verify. We're going to verify that what they're telling us in this rent roll is actually accurate. We can do that through a number of methods, verifying the lease, but you can also do, you can ask the tenants directly, say, hey, what are you paying for rent? And they're like, oh, I'm paying $600 a month. I'm like, it's weird. The rent roll says you're paying $800 a month. And there's some discrepancies there, right? So you can kind of figure out where the discrepancies might lie. Delinquency analysis. Again, same thing with like Reggie was just talking about. Delinquency is going to be a big one of figuring out who's behind rent, and that could be reflected on rent roll as well. Rent comparison. This is another time where you can figure out, okay, here's all my 1-bedroom units, Sally, John, and Sam, all these in different units. But I have a major discrepancy in rents here, and figure out why that rent comparison is happening. And then obviously there's large implications of how the rent roll could affect the actual property management. A good property manager is going to have a solid rent roll in place. And we can tell you from experience, a crappy property manager is not going to have a good rent roll in place. And it sucks. And it's really, this is bean counting at its finest, guys. This is truly what this is the bean counting. And so just realize this is really reflective of the property management on site. And it does have pretty significant impact on your returns, because everything is based on what's actually happening in the units. So let's look at a rent roll and we'll show you kind of what it looks like. So here's a rent roll for Brookley Point. Like I said, you'll see the name of the tenants here. You'll see the square footage of the units, what the units are doing, what the unit number is, the type of unit. So there's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. You'll see their actual deposit. Sorry, I'll scroll in again. Sorry, guys. If you can't see, highlight it to me. Make it a little bit bigger. So across the board, you got the unit type, who the resident is, how much the square footage, what is the market charge, This is going to show you their breakdown if they have any sort of assistance of how their rent's being collected. So they're saying the market rent right now is 961, but this person's being charged 761 total, or they're paying 761 total there. The other thing you'll often see is the fact that sometimes they'll say this person's collecting $760, they're charging $760 in rent, but that might include their $30 water bill and their $10 trash bill and their $50 electric bill or whatever it happens to be. You need to understand the difference of what is the actual rent being charged and what is the actual rubs being charged. Sometimes they'll kind of mix the two of them together, and that's not really appropriate. You got the deposit, you move in, move out. The lease expiration is definitely important for your game plans, guys. If someone just right before they put this thing on the market and they under rented everything by $300 a door to show 100% occupancy, they're kind of screwing you, right? Because then you have an entire year before you can actually affect rents. And so understand where these leases actually stand when you're comparing these. So lease expiration is going to be a big thing here. And then balance. So this person owes $40. Yeah, this one is $470 ahead. So it's good to understand like what is the total balance. And so what I'll do often, I'll take a summary, just kind of like I did the other one. I'll zoom out, I'll go to the end, and I'll start to mash out the data. So here in the rent roll piece, they'll have a summary of the data here. So square footage, I don't really care about. You can see total lease charges. This is actually actual money made, total actual security deposits. And then you got the total balance. Right now they're showing a loss, a delinquent debt of $44,000 in delinquent debt. This is what the tenants owe. That's not good, right? And so you need to figure out what's going on there to kind of parse it out. They're showing the actual occupancy of 95%, the physical occupancy, and you can kind of pull that information out as well. So again, it's just good to see the summary, good to compare. And then I'm going to take this. So they were advertising a 5% physical vacancy, but we've already kind of looked at that in the T12 perspective. So this is how the broker might be justifying 5% vacancy, bro. Look at this. That's why I get it. Then you show them like, dude, that's not what you're actually getting though. So that's how I kind of compare the points there. I'll pull out other information here too. I can't remember what I pulled out. I have it in the one that I had where I'll parse out that. I'm trying to remember what I parsed out specifically though. Josh, Reggie, any other highlights you want to bring up for the rent roll? Any other things you're looking at?
I'll mention that, you see that large balance. It's always good to compare it against like what you're collecting in rent as a percentage, but what's even more important, because you're always going to carry like some current balance. Like not everybody's going to pay by the 5th. If they're less than 30 days delinquent, that's not a big concern. You're concerned with 30, 60, and 90-day delinquencies, and you can get that aged receivable report from the property manager. So it's important to know how that's distributed. So 44,000 sounds like a large number, but if it's all less than 30 days, I wouldn't worry about it. Now,
Sure.
that number, you never want your delinquencies above more about than 10% of the total rent. So that's pushing 25%. So it's high. Yeah, 28.
Cool. Reggie or Josh, anything else you want to highlight with the rent roll? I know I'm trying to get through this a little bit faster. We're end of time.
No, I don't think I had anything for the rent roll.
The other thing I will highlight with the rent roll, guys, this is when you're also going to highlight which tenants are using government subsidies. So if they are marked as low income tenants, where they're capped out with the rent for certain reasons. If they're using Section 8, how much Section 8 is being utilized, whether it's 100% or the tenant's paying a portion, the Section 8 is paying another portion. So this is where you're going to parse out the amount of assistance that your tenants are utilizing as well. So just one more thing to realize there. And if you're looking to get agency debt, there are going to be restrictions with, how much government assistance can be utilized for a certain portion of the tenants as well. So just realize this is going to affect your game plan, understanding what that breakdown is. Okay. Any questions on the rent roll, guys?
I think I remember you guys have some Section 8 properties. Isn't there, it might be an Atlanta thing, I was reading about something, but aren't there some caps on rent increases you can do when you have Section 8 properties?
Yes, it's going to be determined by the local housing authority for the max that they're allowed to charge. And the housing authority will come by and they'll do inspections for you. Honestly, there's pros and cons for sure when you're dealing with Section 8 tenants. We found one of the pros, considered a con, but we had Section 8 that they came out and they were reviewing one of our units, and they found that the windows were not installed properly. Like the windows were like the wrong size and they were screwed shut. Like you couldn't open the windows. It was legitimate hazard.
Yes.
And we found it wasn't just one unit. We found it was like prolific throughout the entire apartment complex. And so I'm glad they did that. I mean, it sucked. We had to spend what was it, 150, 200 grand to replace half the windows in this apartment complex. But in the end, we now have new windows that are appropriate for the tenants, right? The last thing I want to be is a slumlord. So
Hey, Matt, there's a couple of different types of assistance. So Section 8, one of the things that you can do is if you want to charge higher rent, that's okay. But Section 8 is only going to give you a voucher for so much, and then the tenant has to pay above and beyond that. The LIHTC property we have, because it falls under Alabama Housing Finance Authority and under the jurisdiction of the IRS, because there's a tax rebate program. They actually have say-so over rents, and you can't charge people above and beyond. So there's some nuance there, but yeah, a lot of times there is a cap there.
Yeah, and there's sometimes you can be creative with that too as well. Some of those programs are going to have restrictions with you being able to charge for utilities, and other ones will not have restrictions. So you can boost your income sometimes outside of just rent as well.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Cool. That's the rent roll, guys. All right, so those are the three big documents, right? Those are the big three: the OM, the T12, the rent roll. And really, the OM is not even required. It's just nice to give you the glossy brochure to really do that quick comparison. The basic documents, if you're talking to a seller directly, is going to be you're going to do the market analysis that we taught you, and then you're going to say, hey man, I need a T12 and I need the rent roll. Like that's really the two big things you're going to need to really start to understand a deal. Outside of that, there are some additional documents or miscellaneous documents to potentially consider to ask for. CapEx records are going to be one. CapEx records are something you want to look ideally further back, 5 to 7 to even 10 years if you can. Like, what have you done? What are the big projects that have been done over the past 5 to 10 years? Have you resurfaced the roads, or have you straight up dug them up and repaved the roads? Because that's a big difference between resurfacing and paving the roads. Have you restriped recently in the parking lots? When's the last time the roofs were replaced or repaired? How old are all the HVACs? Is this one HVAC's not a big deal to replace it for $5 grand, but when you're replacing 224 HVACs, they're all 35 years old and on the fritz, like that's a significant capital expenditure we need to be prepared for. So understanding what the past upgrades and repairs have been, the larger items, that's going to really determine your future needs and your future goals. And then that's when part of your game plan could be, okay, guys, these HVACs as an example, like they're 15 years old and they got another 3 years of life remaining. Like, what do we want to do as part of our game plan? Do we want to eke along until our refinance and use our refinance money to then use that to replace the HVACs? Or do we want to raise the money up front, replace all the HVACs, and not have to deal with the headache over the next 3 years? And so that's just one small example, but that's going to be one thing you're going to analyze. Unit mix analysis. It's going to be on the OM. It's going to be on the rent breakdown, but it's just sometimes these are relatively simple. There's a 1 bedroom, there's 2 bedroom, there's same square footage. But there are other apartment complexes that have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, but they have like 3 models of each. And so you're like, what is the actual unit breakdown here? You need to understand like what am I actually offering in this apartment complex? So understanding what that unit mix is a pretty key component when you're doing the comparable analysis. The next thing is going to be lease review and lease audits. We'll typically leverage either a property manager or a professional inspection company to really do this. But physically, you as the GPs of these deals, you need to review at least a handful. You need to be the quality control guy to at least check some of these leases to see what they're looking like. We've done this on every one of our deals, and you really need to understand what the leases look like. Some of the deals we've had to review every single lease and compare it to what the rent roll is saying. But ideally, you're leveraging a property manager to do that for you, or an inspection company. Other thing with the leases, you want to understand what the clauses are. Like the last thing you want to do is have all your tenants have leases that say, hey man, using your unit as a freaking crack house is okay by me, and that's in the clause. Like crap, you don't want that in your leases, right? So understand what the unique clauses might be that can screw you there. Are going to be a factor. Rent escalations as well. So sometimes they have built-in rent escalators in the leases. Not often in the multifamily space, but that's what you're going to see if you guys jump into the office space or industrial space. Rents are going to be built into there. Like I have an office space that we're a client of mine, and he's signed with the state of Florida. The state of Florida, it's juvenile detention officers are in there, and they got the rent escalators for the next 6 years in there. Every year it's escalating by a certain amount, and he knows what it's going to be, and that's it. So understanding what that's going to be is key. Maintenance logs, kind of the same thing with CapEx records, just understanding what the actual they have been. If you can actually see the physical maintenance logs, the one thing here, what you're going to see is how well it's actually run from a maintenance perspective. If you have a solid maintenance employee who's doing it and tracking everything, it makes it, you have confidence that it's going to be going forward doing this the same way, and you want to keep that guy on staff. But if he's like, I don't know, I fixed an AC a couple months ago, you're like, oh, well, crap, like we have no idea what these logs look like. So having someone who's actually running a solid maintenance operation is key. And then the last thing is definitely a vital aspect as you take over a property. You might have this grand plan. Like I said, maybe this property, our big value add is the fact that this property is spending $13,000 a year in landscaping, but we know that Reggie's old girlfriend, she's going to come in, she's going to do it for $2,000 a year. And we're going to save part of our business plan. We're going to save $11,000 a year by using Reggie's girlfriend, until you realize that the previous owner signed a 6-year contract with this landscape company that's going to convey with you on sale. And you can no longer use Reggie's old girlfriend because, you know, you're locked into that vendor contract. So just realize these vendor contracts can screw you in that sense. So understanding what conveys. A common one that can screw you is CSC. The old laundry company that runs washers and dryers. They are terrible to deal with. And so just understanding what those contracts look like. And oftentimes they are so one-sided that you're not making any money on that laundry facility because they have a min money they need to make and they don't come out and repair things, and it's a hell. So understanding every vendor contract you can is going to be key. And specifically, what are the termination clauses? Can I cancel all of these upon the sale, or do these have to convey with me? And do I have to honor these? Any other additional documents, Reggie, Josh, you guys want to highlight?
I just wanted to highlight that a lot of what we're going over here is definitely things that I would get after the fact, like after you actually get the deal under contract. Some of it you could get beforehand, but you're going to get so into the weeds and spend so much time, and then it may never even actually pencil financially in the first place. So I would wait to kind of get all this until we're more solidified and like, all right, we're doing this thing.
No, yeah, that's a highlight. That's a great point, Josh. Sorry, I meant to say that and I totally didn't. These are just additional documents you will be reviewing. In order to make an offer, you're not going to review individual leases. You know, you're not going to be looking at, ideally you have CapEx. That'd be nice if they handed that to you, but yeah, Josh, you hit the nail on the head. I'm not going to be reviewing vendor contracts before I make an offer. That's a very great point. Cool. Any other points or thoughts to highlight, Reggie or Josh? No. Cool. Any questions on additional documents, or really that's it, guys? So overall, for general seller document analysis, what do I need to like really receive from the seller? I think you guys should have a good comprehension of that, right? Ideally, you have an OM to help you out a little bit. T12 and rent roll are the big keys there. There's some additional documentation you can. And we kind of talked about trends and how to kind of review them, looking for outliers. And then really this is all culminating in your big picture understanding of the analysis piece that we'll kind of, the climax, so to speak, next week with the broker discussion. We'll end this segment and then we'll jump into whatever we want to next, as far as most likely, you know, deal creation, pro forma creation, whatever we want to do there.
Cool. As far as like insurance goes, have you guys run into like a scenario where you made an offer and then you didn't want to? And I was watching this asset protection attorney where his scenario was he's heard of sellers who try to sue the buyer if the deal doesn't close. And I'm wondering if that would fall under like general liability, or what kind of insurance that would be and what that might cost.
The seller sues the buyer for the deal not closing.
Yeah, like saying, oh, you wasted my time and now the price is dropped. It was some guy on YouTube I was watching.
So depending on the way the offer is written in the state you're in, this is going to change state by state and really contract by contract.
Yeah.
Every contract's going to have specific performance one way or another. Like for instance, in the state of Florida, the standard contract has specific performance for the seller, but not the buyer. So it's specifically written in the contract where the seller has to, like, you can sue the seller to sell his house. If he agreed to and signed that contract, you can sue the seller. But the way the contract's written is you can't technically sue the buyer for not following through with the purchase. The worst you can do is pull that deposit that he's given you, and you can move on, lick your wounds, and try to sell it again. But every state's going to be run a little different, and you can run your contract. That's part of the contract discussion we'll get into. Is you start with an LOI, and then one of the parties is going to draft the original contract, and then we're going to go through the red line process of we go back and forth of revisions between buyer and seller. And one of the revisions the seller might have in there, like, hey, I want you to, I'm going to specific performance. They might have a specific performance for the buyer they want to put in that contract that you would try to negotiate out of it. But yeah, that's going to be contract dependent.
Cool. Okay.
What
I've got
else?
a deal. I've got a deal I'm looking at. I'm trying to plug in all the numbers. It's like a $31 million deal out in Denver. I'm going to reach out to the
Nice.
broker because it's been like 3 weeks since he sent it over, and I haven't had the time to go through it. But I'm going to try to plug it all in and share with you guys, so maybe we can go through it and
Yeah,
find out some stuff.
that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. I'd love to do a deep dive. Throw it in ChatGPT, see what it says.
I'm using that a lot lately.
Yeah.
Cool.
What else,
Thanks.
guys? Questions overall or anything?
So you said start with the LOI and then once, I mean, let's just say they, they gave you the, all these documents, what did you call it? The seller document overview, right?
Mhm.
They sent you all this, the offering memorandum. You start running the numbers. You're like, okay, I think we might have something. You send 3 or 4 proposals. They say yes. You do the LOI. How long is a typical window that you're going to start doing your inspections and going to get your financing and everything else done, and you're going to take this advertising memorandum and you're going to go show it to your investors? Is that like 60 days, 180 days, 120 days? What's a roundabout?
That's a great segue to what we're going to be talking about on Monday with a deal flow, but I'll answer your question now. There's no right answer here, right? But you say typical, so I'll give you a generalized answer because every deal is going to be different.
Okay.
But a typical is going to be a 30-day due diligence period and a 30 days to close after that. That's pretty normal, I would say. So a 60-day total time period from when you have an LOI, well, from when you have a contract signed to when you're closing the deal. You will almost always have some sort of a extension built in. If you're writing your offers appropriately, you as the buyer want the ability to extend, ideally at least up to another 30 days if needed, for financing, for whatever reason you want to build in an extension if you can there. LOI to contract creation, that's going to depend as well. 1 week to 2 weeks. Reggie, what would you say as far as average time from we get a signed LOI to where we typically have a executed contract in place? Or Josh? You're muted, Reggie. You look like you're saying some great stuff though.
I was, man. Yeah. No, so I guess my take on this is like with an LOI, I typically put like, some verbiage in there like, hey, this offer is good until 5 p.m. on, May 28th. And then after that, it expires. And so that could be 3 days, it could be a week, or there could be a specific, they may be calling for offers. And then you wouldn't necessarily put an expiration date on it, but could be a week, could be 2 weeks. But then once they say, okay, we've got the offer, then you start batting the PSA back and forth. And that can take a while to hammer out details. I mean, that can take several weeks, or it can go pretty quickly depending on, how sophisticated or how adversarial the seller is. But once the PSA signed, that's when you hit those general timelines that Matt talked about, 30 days for due diligence, 30 days to close.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'll say an average time is 2 weeks, probably 2 weeks from the LOI being signed to contract being like the PSA, the purchase and sale agreement being fully executed, meaning all parties have signed.
Oh yeah, I was going to mention a lot of times one of the terms in the LOI is, seller, or I think a lot of times it's on the buyer. It's like buyer will have, completed PSA within 10 business days.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. What else, guys? Any other questions? Seller documents or any big picture questions at all? We got, I guess we're negative time, but we'll take 1 or 2 more questions. You guys got anything else?
You don't have to answer it now, but maybe think through. We've got proposed 2 deals that they're actually non-performing assets. One of them is a fire, and there's nobody in it, and there's another one that they're actually at the studs right now renovating the whole thing. So we're trying to figure out what would be your philosophy of actually underwriting a deal that what would it be worth, and how would you analyze the current piece of that? I don't think we'll take these two deals, but I think we may run into some where it might make sense in the future. But I'm just trying to think of the logic.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, that's a severely underperforming asset with an obvious, capital expenditure value add play. You can't. I personally still would like to cash flow as is. So like my min, what I like to say is, ideally I'm not negative cash flow is one of my min thresholds. And so if let's say you have a 100-unit apartment complex and a 10-unit building burned down, right? And so you're burned out that you're planning on renovating and building it back up. So you're at 90% occupancy, best case scenario in this deal. I would want to make sure that I am at least cash flowing break even at a minimum as in its current injured scenario. From a value perspective, I'm still going to look at, hey, what is the after repair value? It's almost like a flip at this point. What is the after repair value once we get this thing up and running? And then you want to have extra equity in there to justify the lift that you're going to do. So a lot of people are like, oh, you can buy it for 10 million because after you fix up these units, it's going to be worth 12 million. It's going to be $2 million to fix it all. Like, there you go. It's all justified. You're like, no, dude, like I'm not going to put all the money in and just get equity break even. I need payment on the back end to justify the risk capital and my time and money and sweat equity is going to go in place to fix this thing up. And that's going to be individually on each of you to figure out how much my time is worth and my risk is worth in order to do that lift. And so for some people, like, hey, I need to make $1 million to justify the risk that it takes to do this deal. Other people are happy with $100,000. You know what I mean? So like figure out where that lands, where you personally. And yeah, each deal is going to be underwritten a little bit differently, but those ones specifically, I really do look at what is the value on the back end, and how much are you going to make really to justify that the energy that's going to go into that.
Yeah, I would really want to get some solid hard quotes on the rebuild for that. I would not use any sort of guesstimation. Something that was a complete rebuild. Because not only is it going to be, you need the pricing to be extremely accurate, but you also need that same person who's giving you the pricing that's probably potentially going to do the work. You need them to give you a realistic timeline to add into your overall business plan and budget. Because you may think, oh, we can rebuild this thing in 6 months, man. We'll have it occupied by the end of the year, and then we'll do a 2-year refi. It'll be great. And then before you know it, they give you an actual quote, and they've been doing this for decades, and they're like, dude, it's going to take 3 years just to redo these 2 buildings that got burnt to the ground because of XYZ, and materials are going to take a year to come in because this is really delayed in the marketplace right now. So we need to go ahead and order these now. And anyway, they're going to get real into the weeds. It's going to give you the detail that you need though to make a more conscious decision on a rebuild or CapEx of that caliber.
All the more reason you want to be cash flowing as is, because timelines will be stretched. Go, Reggie.
No, I really didn't have any other comments. I mean, well, I had some thoughts, I guess, on the fire building. There's a price at which just about anything would make sense, but I always let the numbers paint the picture, and I always try to hit more than a 20% IRR. But just remember, the more value you're creating, the more you should get paid for that. Yeah. Like if you're building something from the ground up, that's why developers typically make the most money if they stay in through the entire course of the project from raw land to rental. They created so much value with such little capital, or proportionally less capital. And so if they stay in through the entire deal, they made a whole lot of money. Whereas if they just got the entitlements done and sold the land, or if they just did the site plan and sold it to a builder, the longer you stay in, the more money you should expect to make. The more risk you take, the more money you should expect to make.
Do you guys have a cash on cash hurdle you try to hit?
So for us, our big hurdle is effectively burring out of it a year or two. Like, honestly, I don't really care. I mean, from the value add perspective, to Reggie's point, that's a big factor. Like if it's a big lift, I definitely want to have some more buffer to justify the lift that we're doing. But my biggest hurdle personally in the deals we're underwriting, I want to see the ability to confidently do a completely 100% cash out refi in year 2. Pushing to year 3 is okay as well. Outside of 3 years, dude, we'll get into when we talk about pro formas. And I don't trust anything outside of a 3-year pro forma. I barely trust anything that what tomorrow's weather is going to be. So like, how do I trust what rent's going to be in 3 years, guys? Like that's a tough thing to really kind of confidently say. And so 2 to 3 years is the max projection I need for me to do 100% cash out refi with a lot of assumptions in there, right? But that's my big hurdle personally when I'm looking at deals. So I don't really care about cash on cash because ultimately it's going to be 100%. Ultimately, it's going to be infinite return once you get their money back. There'll be some sort of pref up until that point. Everyone gets all their money back, and then it's a great payday on the back end. So that's really what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and typically if we meet that hurdle, like if we're able to refi at the end of year 2, cash on cash typically lines out somewhere between 8 and 12%. I mean, that's like average. So it's kind of, I don't know, I guess de facto it just kind of happens if we meet Matt's hurdle. So
yeah.
Hey guys, quick question. When you say you would never buy, an asset that's not cash flowing, at least break even, do you include like, let's say you have to renovate, it's a value add deal, you need to renovate, let's say 20% of the apartments, and you're going to use bridge debt for that. Even in that case, you would not accept to have negative cash flow for like, say, 6 months to a year?
No, there are definitely, I mean, we're doing a ground up development right now, and believe it or not, there's no income for the ground up development until it's actually developed. So technically it's a very negative cash flow scenario. So yeah, I try not to use absolutes, and so there are definitely scenarios where we would buy a negative cash flowing asset. So especially, I mean, there are scenarios where it's part of the business plan where it's currently cash flowing, to your point, and we intentionally want to take down certain units to renovate them up because the market's really demanding. If we get these renovations, it totally justifies the fact to take the entire building down and then renovate the whole building to get to these market rents in the back end. So yeah, I shouldn't have said it so absolutely. There are times where we would take a cash flowing asset. To generalize though, in a perfect scenario, like when I bought my RV park, my second RV park that I bought, I bought it at 2% cap rate, but I bought it with seller financing, and I bought it to the point where I was effectively just breaking even in the front, but I knew there was such a big value add on the back end. I was okay. It was almost negative cash flow up front. But there was so much on the back end. I got it. It was like $15,000 a month in income or something like that. And then we were breaking even, but now we're up to like $35,000 a month in gross income at this point with the thing. It's grown so well. It's awesome.
All right.
Thanks for calling me out, Oliver.
Sounds good.
That is 7-Eleven. Make a wish. No, I'm kidding. We're gonna call it for tonight. Today's the 25th, Thursday. So even though the 29th on Monday is Memorial Day, we will still be here. We'll still be on the call next week. So if anyone has any questions between now and then, 100% reach out. Let us know. Otherwise, y'all have a fantastic
I'll be curious. Maybe we'll get a poll in Slack. I'll just be curious how many people can actually attend next week too. Because if a lot of people are going to be out in NA, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sounds good.
So we got 3 people showing up on.
We'll get a poll in Slack because we do like to have participation, have you guys present as much as we can. So if there's a massive lack of attendance, then maybe we'll push it. But to Josh's point, we're here for you guys, and so we're here to make it happen.
Whoop, whoop.
I don't.